Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 40, the big 4-0.
Aren't we approaching that ourselves?
Why? Why would you say that?
Because unlike most people in the world, I have no problem with the idea of aging naturally. That's totally fine with me. It does not bother me one bit. I used to refer to myself when I was 25 as a quarter century old because I thought that sounded cool.
I remember those many years ago. No, I'm not opposed to it. It's just, I guess maybe if I just don't want to have to talk about it or think about it as much. But yes, I am gray. I am losing my hair. I embraced this. I acknowledge it. So I'm not ashamed to admit I'm getting older. I'm not getting old. I'm getting older. That's my concession.
Right.
But anyway, this is episode number 40 of Capes on the Couch, and it is a big one. Our president level patron, Matt, has requested that we do The Punisher.
Thank you so much, Matt. This certainly is someone that I think everyone agrees needed to have an episode.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we had him on our list of characters to do. When we drew up the master list, Frank Castle was absolutely on the list. And it's funny because Matt said a couple of weeks ago, before The Punisher gets canceled, you should do an episode on him while the show is still around. And if you listen to last week's episode on Captain America, which was recorded 2 weeks prior, you'll get this little fun clip. And before they officially announced that the Punisher Netflix series has been canceled, we can talk about it. Although, like I said, maybe by the time this episode rolls around, it will be officially canceled. And clearly, we didn't make it in time. So no more Punisher, no more Jessica Jones.
Are you losing your hair so that you become Charles Xavier? Because that was really...
He's telepath. He's not a precog. There's a difference.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, unfortunately, there will be no more Punisher on Netflix. There'll be no more Jessica Jones on Netflix. I will throw in those caveats because maybe they come back to Hulu once the merger is done.
I hope so.
We'll see, because some of the Netflix shows have been hit or miss, but I think we can all collectively agree that Jon Bernthal kills it, pun fully intended, as the Punisher. He is amazing in the role, and he encapsulates everything that Frank Castle is. And we are almost done. My wife and I are almost done watching season 2. I think we have about 3 or 4 episodes left.
You mentioned to me that I needed to watch this last season, because there's some interesting therapy going on with Jigsaw. Yes,
Jigsaw, who's never officially named Jigsaw, although they do have a couple of references to, they use the term Jigsaw, but he doesn't go by that moniker necessarily. He is seeing the therapist, Dr. Dumont, and they have an interesting relationship. But when he's going through the initial therapy, there's definitely some things in the show that I go, oh, man, I need to talk to Doc about this. I need his take on it, because I just feel that she's too laissez-faire about his past. And I understand you want to get the person to progress, and you hopefully are trying to encourage them to be a better person. But it seems like she's completely ignorant about the fact that he's this psychopathic deranged killer. And she's just like, no, but we can heal you. Let's work with you. You can be a wonderful person, Billy. Just talk to me. Name 5 blue things in the room, to try and center him. It's just very, frankly, enraging to me, just because I was so annoyed at her, and I wanted to just say, dude, don't you realize who he is?
Right.
He put himself in this situation.
Very good point. I can't comment on it because I haven't watched it yet.
Well, you lazy bastard, you need to get on it.
Because I was working. Thanks.
I stand by what I said, you lazy bastard.
Okay.
Before we get started, as always, we like to do our shout outs. And this week we are going to be giving a shout out and recommendation to Pop Psych 101. If you've listened to our previous episodes, our friends over Popcorn Psychology analyze the therapy behind major blockbuster films. Pop Psych 101 does something very similar. It's a very fun show, very inventive. I like some of the films that they talk about. They just did A Star is Born, which I've not seen, but they talk about the codependency in A Star is Born. So if you like that movie, and we're actually recording this on the day of the Oscars. So by the time this episode comes out, we will see what, if any, Academy Awards that film took home. But you can certainly check them out there at poppsych101.com. So they are our shout out of the week. And before we get started, as always, you can find our show on our website, capesonthecouch.live, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Capes on the Couch. And we have our Patreon, patreon.com/capesonthecouch, where you can subscribe. You can get some additional uncensored content. You can get early access, lots of fun ways to support and encourage the show. And if we reach $50 a month in our patrons, we will live stream our recording sessions. So that is something we're pretty close to, and just a little bit more support from you listeners will help push us over the top. And last thing before we get started, I just want to give another quick shout out and thank you to Ray over at Into the Night, the Moon Knight themed podcast. This morning, I recorded a lengthy episode that's going to air in a couple of weeks. It was a fun to set that up logistically because we're here based in New Jersey and Ray and Connor are based in Australia. So 7 a.m. for me is 11 p.m. for them. So the timing had to be worked out, and we had to make sure that it was, I had to get up early to prep for it and they had to stay up late to record the episode.
I wonder if you had to take into account the phases of the moon.
For scheduling, no, but for the purpose of the episode, yes, that was taken into account because that's how they run their show, based on the phases of the moon. But we had an awesome episode. As I get a confirmed air date, I believe it's going to be sometime in April. Once I know exactly when that's going to air, we will promote that on the show, and you can check out all of our social media pages to see that. So moving into Frank Castle. I can't get over the show, how good it is, and how I'm very sad that there's not going to be any more of it on Netflix. It's just, it really depresses me. But anyway, Frank Castle was created by Gerry Conway, John Romita Sr., and Ross Andru in The Amazing Spider-Man number 129, February 1974. The name, I believe, was created by Stan Lee, but everything else about the character was Gerry Conway, John Romita Sr., and Ross Andru.
Right. So, I remember this. The first name that they thought of was Assassin. Stan Lee said, ixnay on the Assassin A.
Yeah, he basically said that there's no good way that they could really market the character as the Assassin, but the Punisher sounded much more marketable. So he debuted as an antagonist who wanted to kill Spider-Man over the apparent murder of Norman Osborn, who we did our episode on a couple of weeks ago. So you can listen to that one. He later became an anti-hero who fought alongside the Avengers and other heroes reluctantly. And I say reluctantly on both sides, because it was revealed that he was a Marine who became a vigilante when his family was killed by the mob in retaliation for their witnessing a killing in Central Park.
Actually, it sounds like, given the deaths and other circumstances of other heroes, that would really bring them together. Why on earth would they have a problem with Frank Castle and vice versa? I feel like there's some major point to this that we're missing.
Oh, yeah, it's because Frank Castle's solution for every criminal is to gun them down.
Yeah, that would do it. Absolutely.
Frank Castle has a very, very, has zero qualms about killing a villain or those who he perceives to be worthy of killing.
I feel like we just needed to say that, even though I'm sure 99.995% of our listeners know who the Punisher is and what he's about. It's still important to say it out loud, just in case we get that one person that has no exposure to this. We're their first exposure to this character and to the comic universe as a whole, and wonders, whoa, why is this such a big deal? No, it's a big deal.
If we are your first exposure to the Punisher as a character, I want to know how you even found this podcast. In all sincerity, I would be very curious to see if anybody is coming to this podcast. You have no idea who the Punisher is, and we're the ones responsible for telling you about it. Because how did you make it to us without knowing about the Punisher and Frank Castle? So kudos to you for listening, and thank you to all of our listeners for listening. So he made several appearances in Frank Miller's Daredevil run, because Frank is very much the shoot first and ask questions later, where Matt is more of the liberal, I'm going to try and save people. mindset. So they make good foils for each other, I would say. In the late 1980s and early 90s, at one point, there were 5 simultaneous books about the Punisher on shelves. You had The Punisher War Journal, The Punisher War Zone, The Punisher Magazine, and The Punisher Armory.
I feel like this is around the same time, and if I'm wrong, correct me. Reminds me of Spawn in a way, even if there weren't multiple trades. Just the overall popularity of the character, because that seems to fit with this whole dark and anti-hero establishment at the time.
Yeah, they were definitely very popular in the late 80s, early 90s. You also saw something very similar with Wolverine at that time, that Wolverine was all over the place. And so these very gritty, dark types of characters were like white on rice in the 90s, the late 80s, early 90s. They just became very, very popular, I think, because it just appealed to that mindset at the time of this is the only way we have to beat crime is through clenched teeth and killing and dark and grittiness. And that's what led to, Rob Liefeld and all of those types of characters. So the Punisher was really sort of a poster boy for that type of character in that era. In the Punisher Max series, Garth Ennis wrote a grittier, more realistic Punisher who had been active for nearly 30 years, having served in Vietnam. That was interesting because he said that the Punisher's timeline was fixed, even as everyone else's comic book timeline fluctuated. The Punisher was set. He was born in 1950, and that was it. And he served in Vietnam, and he was progressing forward. He was getting older, and he was, 40-something years old, and he was still going, even though everybody else was younger and their timelines fluctuated.
Although I don't usually talk about stuff like this, I'll also point out that with the proliferation of these different comics, his overall image changed. In other words, anyone that remembers the original Punisher outfit, it was much more a superhero type of appearance, the white gloves with the whole spandex thing showing off the muscles, as opposed to the skull t-shirts, the sometimes fatigue pants, combat boots, a much more realistic look, not just the characterization.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was much more based in tactical gear, military uniform, and military weaponry used. And so that just sort of definitely fit in a more grounded, realistic version of the Punisher. So during the Civil War storyline, he joins the anti-registration side along with Captain America, who we just did, because Iron Man is using villains to enforce the Registration Act, and he feels that that's not cool. But after 2 villains join the pro-registration team, Frank kills them, and Captain America beats him up and kicks him off the team. And the interesting thing is, Frank does not raise a hand in defense.
I remember that. And Cap actually asks it because he knows how well Frank fights, and he says, "Why aren't you fighting back?" And Frank says, I'm paraphrasing, but never against you.
Well, I don't know. Is it Frank or because someone else said that basically Cap is the only person that Frank really respects. And he goes, he probably joined to serve because of Steve, because of Captain America. Different war, different costumes, same ideas.
And it's interesting because right after that, Cap actually responds to that comment by someone else by saying, once again, paraphrasing, I really hope that's not the case, because his point was, if this is what I inspire, I don't want that. I don't want a vigilante killer being inspired because of me. So, as we had said earlier, it's clear that there are very broad differences between Frank and everyone else.
Oh, absolutely. And then after Captain America's death, he briefly takes up the mantle. The fans sort of called it Captain Punisher, but he wears a skull and crossbones, but with the colors motif. So it's like the Captain America, red, white, and blue, but he's also got the Punisher skull on the chest. It's kind of a cool look, I'm not going to lie. And then Bucky takes over Cap, and Frank realizes, you know what, I'm not worthy of holding the shield, because he really, truly idolizes and respects Steve Rogers, even in light of all of the other issues that he has that we'll get to momentarily. He really respects Steve Rogers as a leader and as a soldier. So during the Dark Reign story, Castle is killed and decapitated by Daken, Wolverine's son. He's resurrected by Morbius and becomes known as Frankencastle. And he fights alongside other monsters until he's returned to humanity by the Bloodstone. During the Secret War story, He massacres a room full of villains who are watching the worlds collide, because this is when the regular Earth 616 and the Ultimate Universe were colliding, and Kingpin had a room full of villains. Hey, let's watch all this happen. And Frank shows up and basically says, I think I can't take these bullets with me. I might as well use them. And sprays the room down.
And if you're wondering what type of motivation someone like Wilson Fisk would have just to gather a whole bunch of other people just so he could look good with his power, you need to listen to that episode.
Yes, definitely. That covered Wilson Fisk quite well. Moving on to the Secret Empire storyline, he joins Hydra Steve Rogers because he feels that Hydra Cap will use the cosmic cube to resurrect all those that were killed by Hydra, including his family. So his ultimate end game is, or at least in his mind, I'll get my family back if I join Steve Rogers. Even though I know he's doing terrible things, he's convinced that Steve is ultimately going to put everything back to the way it should have been had Hydra never existed. Once the real Steve defeats Hydra Steve, Frank goes on a killing spree of Hydra agents to atone for his involvement with Steve Rogers and Hydra.
If Hydra Cap succeeded and his family was brought back, do you think he would continue to be the Punisher? I'm going to answer ahead of time. I'm going to say yes, because it also means that there are a lot more people that are around that he can kill again.
I don't know. I think ultimately it all comes down to the fact that he's doing this because his family is gone and he wants to make sure that, and we're going to get to the issues momentarily, but he wants to make sure that no one else has to suffer that loss that he did. If he gets his family back, I don't know if he becomes the Punisher. And I'm sure that's a question that's been debated ad nauseum for decades, but I don't think he would continue to operate as the Punisher if he got his family back. So now one of the things that I just want to mention, and I know we don't normally talk about alternate universes or alternate timelines. We tend to stick to just the regular 616, but I have to mention this because it's just such an out there story. In an alternate future where Thanos wins.
You mentioned Thanos, that means it has to be weird. Just saying.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
And you can tell that from our Thanos episode, especially about the infinity everything, including a whole bunch of me rolling my eyes about it. But anyway.
So in an alternate future where Thanos wins, Castle is one of the last heroes standing against Thanos. I don't know how Castle, with his no powers and just guns, is one of the last ones standing, but I digress. So he dies fighting Thanos. He goes to hell. He gets resurrected as the Ghost Rider after making a deal with Mephisto. Then Galactus shows up, wants to eat the Earth, and he says, well, I'll let you have the Earth if you give me the power cosmic. So then he becomes the Cosmic Ghost Rider. Then he joins Thanos in a quest because Thanos says, if you want to punish evil, come with me and I'll let you punish evil all across the galaxy. This is done in the Thanos run by Donny Cates, which I have the trade paperback. It is fantastic. And there's a mini series now on the Cosmic Ghost Rider, because here's the thing. Cosmic Ghost Rider is not introduced as Frank Castle originally. He's just the Cosmic Ghost Rider. He's cracking jokes. He's a wise ass. He's breaking the fourth wall. You almost assume it's Deadpool, that of all the people, the Cosmic Ghost Rider would end up falling on Deadpool's shoulders, because why not? No, it's not Deadpool. It's Frank flippin' Castle as the Cosmic Ghost Rider. So I encourage all of our listeners, go and check out the Thanos run by Donny Cates, and then check out the Cosmic Ghost Rider series. It's hilarious. It's fantastic, because then in the Cosmic Ghost Rider series, he goes back in time to, his initial plan is to kill baby Thanos. He goes back in time to find Thanos when he was a baby in the old, I'll kill Hitler. You know, if I travel back in time, I'll kill Hitler, and then none of these atrocities will happen. He does the penance stare on a baby Thanos who has not committed any sins, and he has nothing to regret, nothing to pay penance for. And Frank has a change of heart and says, I'll raise Thanos the right way so that he doesn't become the bad guy, except this goes way worse because it's butterfly effect.
If you get to mention an alternative, I get to mention an alternative.
Okay, go for it.
Punisher kills the Marvel Universe.
Okay.
Old book, great book. Lots of fun. Don't put too much thought into it. They do a great job making you believe that Frank Castle is capable of doing it. I'll leave it at that.
Fair point. I mean, we could spend myriad time going over all of the alternate universes in which Frank Castle's been involved in. Again, the character has been involved in so many storylines over the past several decades. But having said that, and I know we kind of glossed over a lot of the storylines, but it's because your average Punisher storyline, and this is not necessarily a knock against the character, but your average Punisher storyline is Frank finds some criminal organization. He kills his way up to the leadership, finds the boss, kills the leader, moves on to next criminal organization, kills some of the lackeys, works his way up the ladder, kills the leader. Lather, rinse, repeat. Frank doesn't really have any recurring villains, or very few, Jigsaw being one of them, because of his methods of just killing the bad guys. They don't come back from that. And because Frank tends to go after the street level guys, he's not really involved in a lot of the more powerful folks. He's killing your average regular villains who at best have enhanced strength. That's it. He's not really, Frank Castle doesn't go after mystical people. If you can die by a bullet to the head, Frank will find you.
Well said.
So let's talk about the issues. The number one, first and foremost, such an obvious case of PTSD, combination of his military history, his military background, and then his family being gunned down. Depending on the version, sometimes he's there, sometimes he's not there. Usually he's there, so he witnesses it. Depending on the story, sometimes they're targeted, sometimes they're not. But it's always they die in the park, and Frank is there. So he has such a clear case of PTSD. I don't know, Doc, I don't know how much more you want to add about that, because we've done characters. No, I'm saying not to like gloss over it, but we've done characters with PTSD. But in this case, it's so clear cut. I don't know how else you would elaborate on that. Even I can diagnose him with PTSD.
Right. So now I get the opportunity, and I'm sure this is part of the reason why you tune in to our show. What on earth is Doc going to say different than any other time that PTSD has been brought up? There's an angle that we...
By the way, a PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We kept using the acronym without fully explaining it.
My apologies, yeah.
That's mine too. I said it.
Because that's something that physicians do so often, and it's a bad habit that I know I need to break. I do have one spin on PTSD that we have not mentioned. When we talk about the trauma itself, we are usually talking about someone experiencing it directly. Frank certainly has that from his military experience. It's specifically mentioned several times that it was Vietnam and that he did multiple tours to Vietnam, which, in all honesty, is not that likely to be possible, but whatever. If you did that, that's, I guess, kudos to you for surviving that long, and heaven forbid you actually request it. I digress. Those are direct experiences and can clearly lead to a person having to develop their own system of processing what they've witnessed or what they've done. There is another form of trauma, and you alluded to it, that can happen even if you haven't had the direct experience. If someone you know that is close to you is lost through death or another accident or a bad set of circumstances, and you have a strong enough emotional attachment both to the person and to the event, then you can start to develop stress symptoms regardless of if you were there or not. The in-life example that we have most recent to many of us is 9/11. I was not on site. As far as I know, you were not on site.
No, I was in college.
I know plenty of people, though, and plenty of families that had the experience where they did have someone in the family that was a first responder.
My uncle was a Port Authority cop at the time, and he had to go in. That was one of the scariest days of my life, and I felt so terrible for my cousins because their father was going into the city, and he saw that, and it's oddly enough, and he was a Marine in Vietnam. So he has seen a lot of stuff. Thank you, Uncle John, for your service. But he has seen a lot of stuff.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that. We did not plan that. At least I did not plan that.
But, I didn't know you were going to bring up 9/11, but
just the fact that that's an example where you can have someone not be there and in theory start to develop those stressful symptoms. Whether or not you want to officially use the diagnosis PTSD is up for discussion, up for debate, but it doesn't change the idea that if a person is experiencing nightmares because they saw video footage of something, or, I swear to you, I'm not making this up, a person can have the imagination based on the descriptions of things that have happened, that they start to incorporate that into how they thought something would go. For example, if a close family member was gunned down, we all know what guns look like. We all know, in general, if you've ever seen movies, we may have ideas of what gunshot wounds look like and whatnot. A person may actually say, I don't know what happened, but for some reason, blood and, guts come to mind and I can't stop it. That's still a dangerous reaction, even if that person wasn't there. So PTSD doesn't always mean PTSD. Sorry to get so esoteric about that, but that is another possibility. And the fact that you mentioned in some variations, Frank was there when his family died. Other variations, he wasn't, but he's a soldier that experienced death. And if he knew how they died, then he knows what that entailed, and he can put those pieces together in his own mind very quickly. But the responses are still going to be very similar. So that's the only other new spin I could put on with the PTSD situation.
Okay. The next thing I want to mention, and this is something, again, that's very key to the Frank Castle mythos, is he has a singular focus on revenge, and it is a very black and white morality. Short of maybe, I don't think he's as far gone as Rorschach was, but Frank Castle is one of the most obvious cases of just a black and white morality when it comes to comics. There is no gray, or very, very little gray. I don't think he'll shoot you for stealing a loaf of bread, but he'll deem you a criminal. And if you've done anything remotely involving bodily harm to someone else, Frank will kill you. And he will not hesitate. And that says a lot about his mindset.
Yeah, it's the ultimate eye for an eye. And another interesting part with Frank about this is he doesn't look for alternatives. Most of the time, even if a person has the notion that people need to be punished, and you need to get back at someone for something that they've done wrong, that can take different forms. He doesn't look for that. He doesn't want an apology. He doesn't want change. He just wants to get his job done. He's created this obligation for himself.
Well, I think one of the things is that Frank doesn't believe that people can change. Frank doesn't believe that if you're doing something criminal, that you can be rehabilitated. Like the perfect example in Civil War, the villains show up because they understand that things are going pear-shaped, and they want to help Steve, and they don't want the registration. Frank guns them down without giving them an opportunity. As soon as he sees them, he kills them. And Steve's response is basically, "What the hell are you doing?" And he said, "Well, they were villains and they've done bad things, so they have to go." But the point is that Frank doesn't believe that they can change, and that they used to be villains, but they are no longer, or they're willing to maybe go to jail or whatever for it, but they don't need to die because they're not doing anything that terrible anymore.
I'm going to play this a little bit for humor. Can you imagine someone like Frank Castle in an HR department, like for hiring? In other words, you come in with your resume, you have done everything you're supposed to, you laid out your career, your accomplishments, your educational background, but you have this gap of, let's say, I don't know, 2 to 3 years. And in a general interview, they ask you what happened, and you point out, well, I haven't always made the best decisions in my lifetime. I happen to have had serious consequences due to that, where I wasn't able to work appropriately. This is all of public knowledge and record. What I'm talking about is a criminal record.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to make sure I'm not doing this too nuanced, but someone like Frank Castle in HR, even if the person gives the most textbook explanation and has demonstrated that after that they have done many wonderful things, not just for getting this job, but of being a decent person so that you don't have to worry about that in that particular field, they would just immediately say, based on what you did, no, I can't. Not a chance. We're never going to hire you. Never step foot in this building again. Never talk to me again on the phone. If I ever see you on LinkedIn, I will automatically go out of my way to put bad marks and comments so that you don't get a job anywhere else either. That's the level that Frank Castle takes this to. And that's something that, for the most part, can be incredibly detrimental because, as I'd like to think we know, people have not just shades of gray, but they have a combination of things in their past and in their future that may or may not be ideal at any given time. Things fluctuate. He doesn't even have to take that into consideration. Once a bad person, always a bad person. And if he finds out that at any point you are a bad person, you're going to die. That is incredibly dangerous. And that mindset can lead to significant isolation, as he's demonstrated time and time again. People will use him if they know that someone needs to die, but you don't bring them in for diplomacy.
No, there is no diplomacy with Frank Castle. And it's very clear in the show and in the comics and even in the movies that that's it. There's no coming back. Once you do it, that's it. There's no redemption for anyone else in his mind.
There's another part to this revenge. He did it. He actually killed the people and organization responsible for killing his family. So why does this continue? And that's the debate that I hinted at earlier. And for once, I think we're on different sides to this, because I think that this engine got turned on so strongly in Frank that, purely speculative, he would continue if his family were brought back to life. He can't undo that. Once someone wronged the people that he cared about, he wanted to make sure no wrong ever happened again. So even if a family member came back that he didn't know about and said, Frank, I talked with them, we're forgiving them, we went through the church, he's an Italian American, like we went through the bishop, the pope, all of them, we've gotten them exonerated, we're breaking bread the way we're supposed to, we're good people, they're becoming better people. Do you really think Frank would care?
Well, see, now it's funny because we just watched the one episode, and I know it's about the show and not the comics, but I think it goes to the larger point where he visits his wife's grave and he has a conversation with her. And then he comes back and he talks to Curtis, and he talks to the girl that he's trying to protect, and he talks to the agent in charge of the whole investigation. And he says that this is who he's always been. The Punisher is now who he has always been, and that his wife knew that and that she loved him anyway. Now, that's how he currently feels. I don't know that necessarily indicates that is a correct statement, or he's saying that just because he's wrapped up in his own head over it. But regardless, I think that sort of agrees with your philosophy that he would always do that because it's been turned on. I don't know that I believe that, even though that's how it was written in the show and in some of the comics, I don't believe that that's how he would ultimately end up, because I think it ultimately, even when he was a soldier, he was a moral man. He was a good man, that it wasn't until his family was gunned down and he witnessed it. That's what triggered it. I think you eliminate the family aspect of it. I don't think you end up with the Punisher. And so that's my argument, that even if they were somehow to come back, that he wouldn't continue. I think if there was some way he could bring his family back, and I don't know, maybe if it was done or referenced in other comic runs, that if somehow, in light of all the rest of the Marvel universe, that, one of the characters could somehow bring his family back, that all of a sudden he would stop with the killing. I don't know that that's necessarily how it would play out, but that's how I perceive it.
Okay, fair enough. I don't really have other data to disagree with that. I'm glad that we have this type of discourse, because I think this gives an opportunity for our fan base to also discuss it and maybe it's a combination of those two things. This is all speculative because this is a fictional character. Having said that, this character needs motivation to continue to do certain behaviors. And I'm wondering if it was necessary for even his family to be involved. This could have been a best friend. This could have been an army buddy. This could have been someone that was a neighbor across the street. I think he would have used that as almost an excuse to get more active, to get more involved in whatever it is he was doing. Maybe not to the point of killing, but I think he has always set himself up to be a man of action. And the idea of allowing a family dynamic to create more passivity would not sit well with him once that's been activated. I may be wrong. I don't know that as a fact. I'm just speculating here, and I think it would be a fantastic discussion the more people get involved.
Absolutely. So if you have thoughts on it, please, send us a tweet at Capes on the Couch. You can send us an email, capesonthecouch@gmail.com. If you're listening to this on a platform that allows you to review, maybe you could leave that in the review and talking about your thoughts on the Punisher episode. But please, we have a Facebook page as well and a Facebook fan group. So please, we love the interaction with the fans. We absolutely love to hear that. The one last thing that I want to mention, and sort of ties in with all the other issues that we've been addressing, is the indifference to killing. And I think it derives from the PTSD, but it's also its own thing, because we've discussed characters that suffer from PTSD, that have PTSD, and that have the trauma, but they still value life. Frank Castle does not. I think it may be a blanket statement, but I think it's fair to say that Frank Castle does not share the same value for taking a life that other people do. Now, he understands that he is an outlier in that. And he understands that he does not have that compunction about it and that others do, but is still an awareness of that indifference for the taking of a human life, which is a very, very serious and powerful thing. And Frank is able to do it in almost every version without any thought to it.
That situation creates efficiency. We don't usually think about that with human life. But it was alluded to in the Avengers movie with Thanos, the idea that things are limited resources, you eliminate a lot of the problems if you had half the population, et cetera, et cetera. Frank is clearly not thinking of macroeconomics or socio-political views or anything of the sort. No, he has a job. And the fact that he's a soldier allowed him to learn how to end a life in a very efficient manner. But that is supposed to be used in a limited scope. He no longer has that limited scope. From the most basic standpoint, you can say a soldier is limited by the commands that he has to follow. If he has no one that he's supposed to kill, he won't, or she won't. If you have a situation where other people need to be protected, then you do what you can to ease or eliminate the problem. Frank Castle identified the ultimate problem. Bad people do bad things. You get rid of the bad people, the bad things stop. How do you get rid of bad people? You make sure that they don't breathe, that they don't exist. If he has to give any consideration to the idea, I know I've mentioned this with Casey Jones, I think I mentioned it with Rorschach, that these people have families, that these people have circumstances that may actually be very similar to Frank's. If he has to hesitate because he wonders what else can happen, because an eye for an eye, as Gandhi once said, makes the whole world blind. If he has to stop and think about any of those other consequences, he pulls the trigger slower. And Frank is not exactly putting himself in the good graces of criminal organizations. They're not trying to negotiate with him any more than he's trying to negotiate with them. So any hesitation puts his life at risk, and in theory may put other people's lives at risk if they're caught in the crossfire. So in a perverse way, to his credit, he doesn't want those scenarios. So he does his best to eliminate them. by literally eliminating them. You don't have to have subtlety when you don't have anyone to be subtle with. I think it's interesting that although there are a few arcs where they mention him potentially having interest in people, it doesn't last because everyone knows it can't last. No one can be around someone that causes pure destruction and death as their job. We're not talking about a person trying to, quote unquote, be a hero. We're talking about a person that's trying to eliminate bad. So all he's going to surround himself with is bad people. If you do that long enough, even the people that in theory could help you look at things a different way aren't going to want to be around you, both for themselves because they don't want to be in danger, and also because just about everyone knows deep down that's not a healthy situation to be in for too long.
Yeah, exactly. And he forces his own isolation by living this lifestyle. And he is perfectly okay with it. He had the love. He had the family. Once they were taken away from him, I think in his mind, there's also that portion that I opened myself up. I had the family and they were taken from me, and that causes pain. Therefore, I won't open up to anyone again and I don't have to hurt anymore.
That's an excellent point.
You know, that if he just shuts himself off emotionally from human connections, or at least human connections beyond utilitarian mindset, Frank is basically the ultimate utilitarian, you know, as far as people are concerned. What is your use to me? What value do you bring? Can you help me in this mission? If yes, I will use you for as long as I can. If not, then as long as you're not hurting me or harming my mission, you know, I'm not going to bother dealing with you. But as soon as you prevent me from stopping carrying out my mission, I'm going to find a way to stop you from doing that. And it's usually fatal.
Frank's ultimate acceptance of his path in a way is beautiful because he has established it so well and so fixated that he doesn't have the baggage of wondering what else he could do in any given time, including with his own life. In comic, he's been killed, but at no point does he say, oh, wow, I wish I had done this a little differently. No, at some point, everybody's got to die. He'll die too. He knows it. And if he could take as many people with him that are bad, he'll do it. Doesn't matter. Won't hesitate.
One of the characters in the show said that recently, that she envied Frank because he is pure clarity of purpose. And that, you know, so many of us on a daily basis struggle with who are we? What are we meant to do? What type of person are we meant to be? Frank doesn't have those things because he has everything laid out. Because if he spends time doubting himself, then that jeopardizes the mission. And there is only the next mission. There is only the next scum that needs to be eliminated. There is only the next bad guy that needs to be taken out. So he is of purity, of clarity of mind, for better or worse. But Frank Castle does not have self-doubt at all. So that's something to take into consideration. So moving into treatment, starting as we always do with the in-universe, how would you treat Frank Castle? God help you.
I was going to say very gingerly. Oh, boy. I, for once, am a little perplexed by this because, as you stated so well, he has such clarity of purpose. But there is a technique. I'm going to take an example of a TV miniseries. I saw it as a movie because they condensed it later on, but it's involving Kiefer Sutherland. No, it's not 24. It was called The Confession. It's a hitman that's going to a confessional with a priest, except instead of focusing on all of the people he killed, he focused on the times he didn't kill. A good example was a person that he was supposed to kill in the person's house with the family present. The family was upstairs sleeping. He handed his target a gun, and he said, I will spare everyone in this house. They will have excellent lives because I will protect them as long as you eliminate yourself. And the person pulled the trigger. The gun was empty. And he said, now that you've proven to me that you're willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, Here are your papers for where you will now live, where your family is going to stay. As long as you never come to this area ever again, you'll have no problems. So in other words, a person that in theory had done bad things was still eliminated from a situation where they could have continued to do bad things, but they were allowed to live and they actually got a benefit for the rest of the family. I am not stupid. I am aware that this would gloss right over Frank's head. But sometimes the part of therapy that matters is that you're willing to put these efforts out there. You do not know which one effort is going to make the difference and potentially open a person's mind. The more opportunities you give the person, your chances go from 0.0001% to 0.0002%, et cetera, et cetera. I would hope it's exponential. It may not be. But I think giving examples to someone like Frank, and honestly, incorporating a role model, including someone that we have discussed on this show, someone like Steve Rogers, and pointing out that even though he can't be Steve Rogers, that doesn't mean he can't incorporate the things that he considers to be positive about Steve Rogers into his system. And it doesn't have to be all at once, because that's something that'll hit home. You got another soldier who clearly has had some serious things happen to him and happen to people that he knows and loves, who somehow has to continue to struggle with these things, but somehow you still idolize. You know in your own psyche somewhere that there's a positive kernel that you're continuing to follow. And it's not just that he can fight. At least that would be my hope. And that's what I would go on.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what Frank idolizes about Captain America is that he's the man that Frank doesn't think that he could be. And he follows Steve without question because he knows that Steve will always do what's right. And it is idol worship that Frank believes that Steve is everything that Frank could never be about himself. So that's something very, very telling. And I always like the interactions with Frank and Steve because they are so vastly diverse. They have so many similar shared experiences where they start from in terms of soldiers who have lost people, and yet they vastly differ in the end results. So that always goes to show you that, you know, two people, you put them through the same thing and they'll end up completely different. That's something that I thoroughly enjoy, all the interactions between Frank and Steve throughout the history of the comics.
Yep. I like to call that psychological diversity. More so a better description of nature versus nurture. I don't think it should ever be nature versus nurture. It's nature and nurture in combination with specific time periods, settings, and biology. You get what you get, and Frank got upset.
Yeah. My wife and I just watched Trading Places for the first time. I had seen it numerous times. She had never seen it.
I would have been shocked if you had never seen it.
No. I've seen that movie dozens of times. No, she had never seen it. So it's just funny you mentioned the nature versus nurture. And that's, you know, sort of the whole situation, the bet. And, let's take this homeless person and raise him up. And let's take this very wealthy.
Sounds like you people are bookies. Sorry.
That's a great movie. That is a classic film. Merry New Year. Out of universe. Frank Castle is a soldier with PTSD who has a very stark morality. Again, much like Steve when we were talking about that, in terms of you can certainly find the parallels in real life. What would you say to a real life Frank Castle other than, oh my God, I can't believe this person actually exists?
The good news is it's incredibly difficult to find someone who is as 100% closed off as Frank Castle is. You can find the proper point in just about any human being. You just have to dig, and you have to be willing to take the time and patience to gently go through it, because many people have completely walled off the parts of themselves that would allow them to see things differently. If it's a matter of someone that's experienced family death that has led them to close off, immediately talking about family members may not be the best approach. You may have to go with what they're doing in the present. If someone is aggressive or looks to seek out violence, that doesn't necessarily mean it resorts to killing. Are you a fan of MMA? Are you a fan of martial arts, other physical ways to get out aggression in a way that's considered, for the most part, socially acceptable now? Although I know there are some people that dispute the positive aspects of those types of activities. I get that. But it's still better than killing, in my opinion. If it's a matter of previous military experience, and I know we've discussed this in multiple prior episodes, you don't want the person to get to the point where they're trying to tell the exact same story of their experience over and over again. And on the other side, if someone doesn't want to talk about the details of their experience, you don't have to hit them over the head with it and say that that's the problem. Whatever avenue is open, that's the one you take in the given time period. Clearly, if someone is so on edge that they can't sleep, that they can't do some of the things that they want to, and acknowledge that they want to do them as a positive thing, then you use that as the carrot, the motivating factor as to why they should even listen to you in the first place. So if a person tells me they can't sleep, I may not immediately say, here's a pill to help with that, but I might say, what tools have you used already that have improved your sleep? Because now I'm giving them the power again, and they may point out, depending on who they are, yes, I've tried these over-the-counter pills, they didn't work. Or they may say, well, a glass of warm milk usually gets me to sleep, but then I get a nightmare, it pops up, and I don't know what to do about that. And then I can adjust accordingly.
Well, I think just in general, the solutions that take the best are the ones that we come to ourselves as a general. If you tell somebody, oh, do this and you get the solution, it may work, it may not. If you help lead them to it, it will last much longer. If you teach a man to fish, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So
soldier mentality sometimes can click back in, though, at the most unexpected time periods, and you have to jump on it. What I mean by that is if you've developed a rapport to the point that they have the same respect as they would a commanding officer, you can get a person in the situation where they will say, yes, sir. I've actually had that happen once. It probably will never happen again, where I made what I thought was a light suggestion, and the person didn't say the words, yes, sir, but I could see the difference. Like immediately at the end of that particular session, they were out the door. They were on the phone immediately on their cell phone saying, hey, so-and-so, yeah, I'm going to be going to the store. I need to pick this up. The doctor told me about this. I really think it's going to help. I was flabbergasted because this person I thought was blowing me off for the past 2 or 3 weeks. And just it clicked in. And like I said, it was much more of I have a duty now to fulfill, as opposed to, oh, you're right about this, or you've enlightened me about something. So sometimes that can be used to your advantage. It just depends. And it's totally random in my experience. If other people have had experiences where it's more regimented, please tell me. I will say you would have a greater opportunity of that. For example, if you're in service, for example, military physicians have a much greater opportunity to interact with fellow soldiers as opposed to a complete civilian. And I'm saying this from listening and reading about other physicians with that level of experience. The one thing that you can't make as a mistake is, although they are officers in their branch, don't call yourself an officer. In other words, if I were in it, I can't say I'm Captain Issues. I'm still Dr. Issues. Because if you say that to a soldier that's been on the front line and you haven't, then you destroy that rapport.
Yeah, then you shoot your credibility right in the foot.
Right.
That's interesting because I know that we've mentioned a couple of times in other episodes with other characters, leading them to their solutions and helping use where they are. You have to start where they are. You say that all the time. So starting where the soldier is and working with their mindset as it is, getting them to the point that they can make those determinations on their own. So I think that's very key, and that would certainly be very helpful in dealing with Frank. So let's take all of this and let's see what happens when we get Frank Castle on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Mr. Castle. I'm Dr. Issues.
Doc,
What would you like to discuss?
I'm really the talking type.
So I've understood.
Now, why are we here?
Frank, may I call you Frank? Okay, I wanted to talk about the
Look, Doc, let's get one thing straight. I do what I do because it has to be done. As long as you get that, we're good. If you try and talk me out of it, I'm gone. We good?
We good. I noticed that while you were saying all of that, you were really gritting your teeth. That's painful. You want some help with that? Like with that tension?
I thought you were a head shrink, not a dentist.
But all right, let me break it down for you. You're using voluntary muscles to do that. And those muscles' response comes from your brain. So if you don't want headaches 100% of the time, you might want to do something about that, and that comes from your brain.
What do you suggest? Yoga? Incense? Meditation? Get out of here with that bullshit. I'll get a night guard while I sleep. Is that good enough?
Well, that depends. When do you sleep? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you have nightmares. Let me guess, 2 or 3 a night? Cold sweats?
My whole life is a nightmare, Doc. I'm just trying to kill the demons.
Okay, let's go with that. What's the worst demon? You want to kill a demon, right? I'm not against, like, killing truly bad things, so how do you do it? What's your plan?
I find the people who hurt other people, and I make sure they don't hurt them anymore. Move on to the next one.
And I know you have a high production rate, although I admit I can't approve of your methods. Oh boy. How would you like to be more efficient?
Well, like grenades?
Wow. I'm thinking of the tactical side before the battle has begun. So, okay, surely you've read The Art of War.
Yeah.
Okay, so when do you actually win most of the battles?
I do my homework, Doc. I know where they'll be and when. I line them up and I mow them down.
Okay, then here's a scary thought for you. Right now, out there somewhere, there's an enemy, your demon. That person has outmaneuvered you, outplanned you, has a larger arsenal. So what do you do for that?
Bring a bigger gun.
Okay, but I'm saying you're always there, so you're the bigger gun. You don't even know it.
Don't give me any bullshit metaphors, Doc.
There's nothing BS about it. You're getting worn out. And I know you've accepted that, but I'm saying we can put some extra tread on those tires if you do it the right way. You're a soldier. You had a regimented routine. You knew when to wake up. You knew when to exercise. You knew when to go to sleep. But did you learn to improve? And you'd be lying to me if you told me you've incorporated that.
I learn from every mission. That's my training. Each mission is training for the next one and the one after that.
So you're honestly telling me that you're not more worn down than before, that you don't get tired quicker, your wounds don't heal as fast, you're not thinking as much on your feet, you're relying just on the previous experience rather than your reflexes. Look, I'm not saying you're not gaining wisdom through experience. I'm saying you're not gaining wisdom through the experiences of others.
Look, we're all getting older, Doc. I mean, well, not all of us. If I'm coming after you, your minutes are limited. But I can't go back to the younger body. All I can do is just keep coming. And that's something that's kept me going. I don't stop because I can't stop.
So do you want to slow down and stop, or do you want to keep going for longer?
Stopping isn't an option as long as there's scum out there hurting people. I tried to stop. Doesn't last long.
Okay, so other than going nonstop, have you figured out a way that keeps you going longer? It seems like you already eliminated that possibility in your mind. All right. What about the physical stuff? Your guns get recalibrated. You check on weaponry you haven't used in months to make sure it can still fire when needed. You're willing to do all that for your equipment, but when I'm confronting you with you about yourself, you just keep letting it go.
I can't oil my joints.
But you can fine-tune your mind.
My mind works fine, Doc. I have a mission. I complete the mission. I move on to the next one.
I see that's your mantra, apparently. Fine. I know you're a results-oriented man. You don't want any woo-woo new age stuff. You want results. But then I gotta ask you this. What's with the war journal? You said your brain works fine. What do you need to write it down for then? I thought that was only for little girls with diaries. And yeah, I am confronting you on that.
I keep a record so if I die, someone can pick it up where I left off and finish what I started.
You actually care about that. Okay, but, well, look, let's be honest. No one's gonna finish that. It never ends. Killing and killing and killing, that never ends. You know that.
Someone has to do this.
Okay, so the stuff you wrote down, they know your kill count, they know where you've been, they know what you used. What good does any of that do? Anyone with training can do those things. What's the mindset that kept a man like you going nonstop from one crime boss to another? What do they know about loss, about the need for revenge, even when the revenge has been completed? Your family's not coming back. What was your routine? Who were you? Nobody gets any of that. And because of that, no one's going to care like you do. You say you want to keep the fight going. Then show them the uncomfortable parts that you still push through every day. Otherwise, you're no different than those new age gurus that show you the end product and don't show you how the sausage gets made.
They know why I do what I do. And I do it so no one else has to feel my loss. My goal is to be the last one who goes through this shit.
I'm sorry to say, Frank, but you're actually on the losing side of this one. People were going through something very similar while you were going through your own situation. People did before you. People do right now. People continue to feel this in the future. You just let through one possible window that you could connect to those other people, and you're willing to brush it off just because of your own personal mission.
No, you don't get it, Doc.
Neither do you.
All right, you know what? We're done here. I'm through wasting my time on this shit.
You're only punishing yourself.
Oh, how long you been sitting on that one?
I'll admit it's a low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, say something like that again and you'll get a pineapple.
Duly noted.
You survived.
I haven't done anything wrong.
So you think.
Hey, I know my own record, and it's not criminal. He has nothing against me. That's why I was able to go at him, but he's a brick wall right now, and I'm not punching through.
All right. No, I understand that. I figured if there was anything that he could have used against you, he might have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a lot of security to keep things safe and secure, but there's no way he went in there without having some sort of weapon on him. And when he mentioned pineapple, I realized that meant grenade. So that's why I kind of backed off. And yeah, using that kind of pun with someone like him was a bad choice, even if his name is Punisher.
Yeah. You know, we made it through the whole episode, and I don't think we had that many jokes, but I have to say this one. When I log each episode, I tag them as E and then the number. And so I saw E40, and this is the Punisher. So does that mean that Frank Castle is Captain Save-A-Ho? Should I save her? I want to be saved.
That's incredible. Wow.
I want to know even how many of our listeners would get an E40 Captain Save-A-Ho reference. I'm sure at some point in his many, many years, Frank Castle has killed a pimp and has saved a prostitute. So I'm sure somewhere there's a prostitute that owes her life to Frank Castle, and therefore he is, in fact, Captain Save-A-Ho.
Well, he certainly has gone after sex traffickers. I know that for a fact.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah. So someone like Robert Kraft better watch out.
Ooh. What is it with the Patriots and deflating their balls? I don't get it. I really hate the Patriots organization. So
sorry, we had to do something at the end. It was just way too clean an episode. We have to include these jokes, people.
They come out in some fashion one way or another. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Next week, we are starting our back-to-back Captain Marvel episode. So next week, we're doing Carol Danvers, and the week after that is Monica Rambeau, and we're going to have a very special guest featured on the skit. As a big fan of ours, Janae, she has the Lolita Gentry Project is the podcast and the website that she started up. You can follow her at P31 Mission on Twitter. So Janae, I know she's going to be very excited to get the shout out. When I came up with the idea to ask her, I really just felt in this current era, there's just no good way for me to attempt to voice a black woman. I was like, nope, not even going to touch that one. I'll find someone else to do that voice, and then I don't have to worry about it. We'll write it together, and then I'll give it to Janae, and she can voice it, and then I don't have to worry. It wouldn't be done in a disrespectful fashion, but I really don't want the implication that I'm attempting any sort of vocal blackface. So
that's fascinating, because that is an incredible admission on your part that there are certain voices that you won't touch.
Oh yeah, no, I will not. I will not try it. So that's going to be Monica Rambeau. And then we're going to do 2 more episodes, and then we're going to take a little bit of a break because, as I've mentioned a couple times on the show, my wife is pregnant, and we're going to be coming up on the due date, and we're just going to take a short hiatus while my son is born and we bring him home and all of the fun stuff that's associated with having a new baby. I really cannot wait. But after Monica Rambeau, we're going to do The Monocle, a.k.a. Sir Reginald Hargreaves from the Umbrella Academy. So this just came out on Netflix, and I was just informed that that's a Dark Horse comic. So it seems like a pretty interesting show, pretty out there. So we will be doing The Monocle, and he's the head of the Academy. And then we're going to end our season with John Constantine, not John Constantine, but John Constantine from DC Comics Hellblazer. DC/Vertigo. So not Constantine, because that's how they Americanize it, but it's Constantine. That will be the last one, and then we'll go on a brief hiatus. Once we're settled, we'll come back, and Doc and I will have more episodes. So you can find all of our stuff on our website, as we said at the top, capesonthecouch.live, capesonthecouch@gmail.com if you have some thoughts or you want to comment. If you listen to us on a platform that allows you to rate and review, please rate and review, like, subscribe, all of that stuff. We have a Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. Maybe we'll get a Discord one of these days.
Hey!
Into the Night has one, and that's what we recorded on earlier, so that should be a lot of fun. Maybe we'll check out a Discord and our fans can interact that way. Doc, anything else you want to add before we head out?
The worst punishment that you can give is the one in your own mind. So please be careful.
True story. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.